Our next panelist is Anna-Liisa Heusala. She's a senior researcher at the Aleksanteri Institute and a fellow of the Center of Excellence in Russian Studies funded by the Academy of Finland. Her expertise includes Russian public administration and politics, Russian public sector leadership, comprehensive security and security policy. Currently, she runs a project dealing with Russia's national security trends and Finland's strategic choices. Anna-Liisa, your turn now.
Madam President, Mr. Chancellor, Mr. Rector, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to continue with the ideas of Irina Byzykina, because I think that she presented a really nice beginning here by saying that we, instead of asking what remains unknown, we also have to consider how we will understand. The question for this panel was, however, what remains unknown about Russia, and my answer simply is comparative analysis of Russia and its security challenges in the global context. Now, I understand that this answer may be surprising to many of you, considering the amount of Russia studies that we have in the world today. So I will try to explain with some examples what I mean by this. Many of us remember the excitement of the 1990s after the historically unique transformation of a way of life in the Russian Federation. Western researchers hurried to Russia in order to understand about the evolution of the post-Soviet life and the challenges of this transition. Ever since this time, many have wondered whether it is possible to investigate such a country as Russia with similar theories and methods as other countries, particularly in the West. Even today, systematic comparisons of Russia's development with other societies are relatively uncommon in the Russia studies. I think that Russia studies to some extent suffers from an image where it has limited usefulness for the advancement of social sciences. Now, bear with me with these critical ideas, because I will end with a very positive note. Russia remains the exceptional and different topic, even when in reality it is often a representative of a vast majority of societies in the world. I think that in addition, our perspective on some key areas of Russia's development, such as Russia's security policy, is affected by culturally and politically bound analyses which underline popular themes and perspectives on how Russia should be viewed. Many of us remember examples of analyses which underline Russia's uniqueness, Russian exceptionality. This line of thinking has to some extent been supported by Russians themselves, including Russian politicians, who sometimes have favored the idea that you cannot understand Russia. Now, in the area of Russian security policy studies, the Cold War has cast a long shadow over the whole field. The core of serious security studies have been understood as involving questions of armed forces and military threats, or geopolitically oriented international relations inquiries. In this framework, Russia's internal development is often reduced to speculations about the leadership's mindset and intentions. Russia's developmental paths, or its choices, have rarely been systematically compared to those of, for instance, the United States or China. Russia studies is not a simple field. It is loaded with political tensions which do not affect other fields. Looking into the future, I believe that most of us will conclude that we do need concrete cooperation with the Russian Federation in many areas of life. Security sector is no exception. Decision makers and the public would like to see studies which can help to assess Russia in a realistic perspective outside of political tensions. The more practical the need for Russia studies, the more essential it is that we can produce comparative studies and understanding. Therefore, the challenge for Russia studies in general, and studies on Russian security in particular, is to be able to produce comparative analyses based on deep understanding of Russia's cultural background in its institutions, practices, and ways of thinking. The boundaries of security studies need to be re-examined as well. The definition of Russian security policy is only now being opened to a wider perspective, which takes into account the Russian definitions of what constitutes security. This means to have happened as a result of the ongoing serious international conflict and disrupted dialogue between great powers. We are finally interested in Russia's own security perspective because of these negative consequences, which many call a surprise. It is quite apparent that we need an increase in studies which explain how Russian leadership and Russian leadership really works, and what is the institutional rationale in Russia's organizations. How many of us here today, for instance, can actually describe how the president's security policy decisions are transformed into federal laws and put into effect in various organizations? I believe that such knowledge would greatly help us to understand today's Russia. Comparative studies help to avoid bias. Almost by nature, a well-conducted systematic comparison makes it more difficult to pick and choose what to say about Russia, and instead forces the researcher to build and justify a set of transparent criteria for analysis. There is another reason for the need of comparisons. Russia is facing globalizations just the same as any other society. Its input in solving some of the major challenges for all humankind is critical. Let's just think about global economic inequality, climate change, or transnational security threats, which have been mentioned here today. In today's world, the limits of state sovereignty are shaped by globalized phenomena and interaction affecting security at various levels. And this interconnectedness cuts across traditional spheres of interest. I think it is critical to ask, what are the consequences of transnational security threats for the Russian state? And how does Russia's development affect the combating of these threats in a global scale? By searching answers to these types of questions, we can redirect our attention to significant human questions in which I believe that Russia studies can make an impact and hopefully continue to flourish in years to come. Thank you.